Okay, so my quick tip for today is actually twofold. The first one is how to find ancestors with limited information. And the other one is don't sleep on the other field on FamilySearch.org, because the other field is the tool that I'm going to use to find those mysterious ancestors. And to do that, I'm going to have to tell you a very short story and give you a quick example of how I applied that method. So I recently spoke to a cousin who's in her mid 70s, and she told me a story about her great grandmother, Martha Clark, who lived in New Orleans decades ago. She said that she tried to talk to her great grandmother about her ancestry, and she started by asking her, "Well, who is your mother?" But Martha had refused to talk. She refused to say one word about it, and so my cousin figured, well, there's probably not much I'll ever know about that side of the family, given that my great grandmother won't talk. And me being a genealogist, my first thought was, well, let's focus on what you do know. And so we kept the focus on the fact that she knew her great grandmother's name, Martha Clark, that her great grandmother did die in New Orleans. That was her place of residence. And so with that, that gave me a starting point. So the first thing that I did was I looked at a website known as genealogybank.com. For any Louisiana researcher, particularly in New Orleans, this is a place you definitely want to become familiar with because they have a treasure trove of historical newspapers online. Now, although the repository defaults to viewing newspapers for all the states, of course, we want to filter to Louisiana and specifically New Orleans for my cousin's great grandmother. So we find New Orleans here, we type in her name, Martha Clark. And I asked my cousin approximately when did her great grandmother die, and she said it was somewhere in the 70s. So I just did a search in the range between 1970 and 1980. You have to remember that these New Orleans newspapers, they go back into the early 1800s. So this collection is vast. So when you click the search button here, you end up with a result of 46 hits for Martha Clark in New Orleans. It happens to be this one here, this February 3rd, 1975 newspaper obituary for her. Now, I'm not going to click on this because this article happens to have information with living individuals. And so I do not want to disclose those because I do not have their permission. However, I do have a screenshot here of that same newspaper obituary. As you can see here, February 3rd, 1975, and I blurred out the living individuals. And it says here, Martha Clark of New Orleans, died February 2nd, 1975. It says that she's the mother of Mrs. Elmer W. Smith and Cornelius Williams of Massachusetts. And then it talks about, how she's grandmother of Mildred Smith, Vivian Fleming, Lillian Goodson, and so forth. So I could confirm that these were my cousin's relatives because Vivian Fleming was her mother. Elmer Smith was her grandmother. When I asked her if she knew of her grandmother having a brother named Cornelius Williams, she was not familiar with that name. So then I continued to do further digging. I looked for her grandmother's newspaper death notice. So this death was in 1975, but 5 years later, here, September 26, 1980, we now have her grandmother who passes away, Mrs. Elmer Smith, who she did confirm for me that they used to call her Heidi. And so it says here she's the beloved wife of Edgar J. Smith, daughter of the late Mrs. Martha Clark, but also sister of the late Cornelius Johnson. So here, the name Cornelius Williams has now been changed to Johnson. And this is not uncommon, particularly with newspaper death notices. You will either have misspellings of names or the wrong last names. So, of course, as a genealogist, now I've got to do some digging to figure out who's who. And what I decided to do was start with the name Cornelius Johnson to see what I could find out. But like I said, when I mentioned this name to Cornelius Williams and Cornelius Johnson to my cousin, she was totally unfamiliar with it because, like she said, no one in her family talked about additional family members. So she really didn't know anything. So now with this information, now knowing that we've confirmed Elmer Smith, Martha Clark, and Cornelius Johnson all living in New Orleans, now I got to do some digging. So I go back here to the Family Search website. And as I mentioned to you earlier, so what we want to do here, well, I'm sorry, let me go back, refresh that. So this is the main page for Family Search. And what we want to do is click more options, because I want to do a more exhaustive or advanced search with the information that I have. So what we do here is we click more options to get more fields. The additional fields that we get here, as you can see here, we have the other person. So this was the other field that I was talking about. This is the field that's going to help me figure out who these people are. Because as you can see, I don't have much. I don't have ages. I don't have any, I don't have a father's name. I don't have, there's a lot of, there's additional information I don't have, but I have enough. So what we do here is we start with Elmer. So I click, and I mean, you could do this in, in different combinations. But what I did was I chose Elmer Williams here. I clicked the other person field, and then I typed in Cornelius Johnson. Why am I doing this? Because the idea here is to search, hopefully, any census records that may contain these two individuals associated together on the same census within the same household. That's the key. I know some of us have had several challenges trying to find individuals because we don't know. We may even have, information as far as age and state of birth or things like that. But if you're dealing with really common names, and let's say you're looking for James Johnson, well, there's a million James Johnsons in many different states. So how do you know that the James Johnson that you're looking for is your James Johnson? This is one way that could be a potential help to you, by if you can identify any other associated names in the house, that might be able to help you identify the household. And in this case, looking at death notices, I was able to put some of that together. So we click the search button here, and what do we find? I'm sorry, let me go back. I forgot to put in one thing, which was Elmer. Let me go back. Elmer Williams, Cornelius Johnson, and type in New Orleans. So we're going to narrow it down to any of these two individuals in the same household in this particular city. And when we click search, the first entry here, the first result, Elmer Williams, born in 1903. And there's a Polly Clark, there's Martha Clark, and there's Cornelius Johnson. So we have to actually look at the record to figure out what's going on here. And what we find is right here. Polly Clark, head of household. Born, she's a Black female, 48 years old, divorced. Says she has 5 children born to her and 5 living. And she's from Louisiana, and her parents are from Louisiana. Then it says Martha, daughter. We can't tell exactly what her age is. It could be 23, it could be 33. We're not sure, but it says single. And it says that she has 2 children born to her and 2 living. And then it says here, grandchild. These next 2 are grandchildren. So grandchild, Elmer Williams, grandchild, Cornelius Johnson. So these 2 children, ages 7 and 5, more than likely the children of Martha Clark, as the death notice stated. But now we know the name of Martha's mother, Polly Clark. Now there's one factor that I have to take into account, which is the location of this family. It's in Iberville Parish, or in the town of Plaquemine. And so you might say, well, how do you really know that this is the correct family unit? This could just be coincidental that this group of people lives, has this same combination of names, living in a different city. Or you could hypothesized that they could have migrated from Iberville Parish to Orleans Parish later on. So that's something that has to be investigated. So what I do here is I go back to my filter here and change my parameters from Elmer Williams to Cornelius Johnson. And also we want to take into account that 1910 census that I just showed you shows that Cornelius was 5 years old, which suggests that he was born around 1905. So if I look for this Cornelius Johnson in New Orleans, in any census that exists between, you know, after he was born all the way up through 1940, because that's the most recent census available. And we, like I said, I mean, I could change the range of his birth, you know, just to make sure on the census it's not 1904, 1906 or whatever, but I'm just going to leave it at 1905 and click search. Oh, I'm sorry. And then get rid of his name down here in the other field. So we won't even use the other field. We'll just search for him, Cornelius Johnson. Now we have a Cornelius Johnson born in 1920. And there's no information about who he's related to in the house. I mean, he's approximately 15 years old here, but you don't see any relatives. Well, let's look at the actual document and figure out why. So what do we have here? We've got, oh, let's zoom in on that. Cornelius Johnson, right here, lodger. So the head of household is a Robert, I can't tell, it might be Robert Wilbert, not really sure, but his wife is Anna. There's an adopted daughter here named Ida something that I cannot make out, but what we see here is a lodger, Martha Clark, age 31. So I think it's close to the same age as the other one in the 1910 census. We've got Polly Clark, who is 55, and then we've got Cornelius Johnson, who is 15 and single. And he is exactly the same age as the one on the 1910 census. So, and where are they? They are in the city of New Orleans. So this pretty much confirmed it for me that this is the same family. And I, of course, couldn't wait to get on the phone and call my cousin and tell her, you know, I know who your great grandmother's mother was, and let her know that her name was Polly Clark, and this was a name that she'd heard for the first time. And so there, like I said, there are some living individuals who I did not want to disclose on that death notice, who she said she was going to reach out to and confirm if, or, you know, at least find out from them if they ever heard the name Polly. But you know, they're listed as lodgers here. So unfortunately, on this census, it's not showing you how they're related to each other. But you can make an educated, you know, guess here that more than likely these are the same individuals that are there in 1910. They just migrated to New Orleans, and they're living in this house with these individuals. And I have not investigated this to figure out how they're connected with these folks, but this is just a brief example just to show you how you can find a lot with a little. And knowing that you have something available to you like the other field, it's something that I think a lot of genealogists don't use very often. And this is why I say do not sleep on that field, because it can be very, very helpful to you when you're in situations like this where you don't know a whole lot of information about your family. So with that, thank you for your time. I hope this helps you, and good luck to you.